Electricity, a wonderful thing for us to have. It powers our fridges, our microwaves, our hopes, and our dreams. Okay, maybe that's slightly too philosophical, but in the apocalypse, once the grid shuts down and the lights turn off, electricity can become scarce. A distant dream, something we aspire to. Well, I wanted to test out just how far I could get with the current power systems in Vane, and powering a house felt too easy. So in this video, I attempt to power an entire town. Let's get into it. First things first, to enable us to power an entire town, we need to understand how electricity works currently in Vane. Once the power grid shuts down, we have a few options to get somewhat immediate electricity. There's a few exceptionally simple ways to get some form of a small electrical circuit working for your base. In essence, you need a power generator of some form, be it a solar panel, a wind turbine, or a gas-powered generator. Then these can be connected to your fuse box, and ta-da, you have a simple power grid. The problem with this is redundancy. Once your power generator stops working, for example when you have no gas or no sun, everything turns off. Equally, if you want to power some more power-thirsty things, like perhaps a fridge and a microwave at the same time, you may not be generating enough power for these things to work. This is where having a battery comes in. This ensures that when you're generating enough electricity, any electricity you aren't actively using is stored, ensuring that when you want to use something a little more thirsty in terms of power, you now have the required capacity to do so. It also, of course, means that when the sun goes down and your solar panel stops working, well, you can turn the lights on, which would be pretty handy, wouldn't it? So now we understand how the electrical systems work in Vane, albeit at a scale much smaller than I'm aiming for in this video. The next question was where? Which location on the map provided the best opportunity to test how far I can take the electrical systems in the pursuit of powering an entire town? Well, there were quite a few choices available. I could opt for Saranac, one of the OG towns on the map, complete with church, school, shops, and a substation of its own. It's a pretty sizable town to try and get online though, and everything is quite spread out, but it is an option. Then there's Dannemora to the north, loads of shops, a gas station, a school, the prison, but Dannemora is pretty large and has some complex buildings within it, so it didn't feel like a natural test for this video. Lion Mountain to the west, much more compact, lots of houses, a few unique buildings like the quarantine centre and museum, so a pretty solid option. Or there's Loon Lake and some of the hamlets there, especially around Loon Lake itself, with its collection of shops, houses, and more. If you want to see which locations you should really explore in Loon Lake, watch the video at the top right. So ultimately, I wanted a town that wasn't too big, that had a variety of buildings, but that didn't have any huge buildings with multiple fuse boxes of their own. Now, when Vane was being developed, there was a town that was the first to be created, and that proved to be the testing ground for early players and the devs. So it only feels right that we use that as our testing ground for this video. That town being Redford. Redford being ideal because it's relatively compact. Yes, there are some outlier properties, but it gives us a good basis to see if I can make electricity work on a bigger scale. But of course, that is the big question. How do we get this working at scale? What's going to be required? Surely we just need to connect a battery to another battery and then connect a house to each battery. Well, let's talk about daisy chaining. A while ago I did a video, powering your base, everything you need to know, and within that video I went through some of the basic principles for getting your base wired up. I also, towards the end of that video, talked about how I'd been able to power a whole trailer park by daisy chaining batteries together. This video was posted on the 10th of December 2025, and on the 17th of December 2025, a hotfix was released patching out the ability to daisy chain batteries together, as they'd create an infinite amount of power. I didn't take it personally, honest, but this means that we can't connect a generator to a battery and then to another battery and have the circuit work. Shown on screen now using the extension port, which will indicate the circuit that works by lighting up, we can see the simple one battery circuit is fine, but add another battery and the power won't pass through. So that takes out the idea of daisy chaining batteries together to power our town. So how can we A, wire up an entire town and ensure that each building receives electricity, B, ensure that we're generating enough electricity for the whole town to work, i.e. lights in houses, fridges, microwaves, TVs, stoves, etc., and C, How can we ensure that this works throughout the day and night, and that there's enough redundancy to ensure that we don't have any blackouts? It's a tall order, right? Well, let's tackle A first. How can I wire up each building in the town and ensure that there's enough electricity? Whilst I couldn't daisy-chain batteries to pass through power from one house to another, there was a couple of options available to me. I could use the newly added extension ports added as part of 0.024. These would enable me to wire over much greater distances and ensure that I could physically get electricity from point A, my generator or battery, to point B, the next house I wanted to power up, without having to worry too much about how far away they are from each other. I just need an extension port to do so. One problem with these, though, is that I'd have to have a UC to cover every single one of them if I wanted to maintain them, which is a bit of an issue. In my testing, though, I came across an exceptionally useful little surprise. I could just daisy-chain fuse boxes together. This means that I could wire one house to the next house to the next house. No resources required at all. No extension ports needed, no additional batteries, just wiring one house to the next and the electricity will pass through. So that's part A covered. Each building within Redford can now receive power. Each can be wired up. Question B was around how we can ensure each building gets enough power. And to really ruin this process-driven logical numbering, we'll cover that off and part C together. How do we ensure that the power works day and night? It's not just sometimes on power system for the town. Well, I'll reveal something that's surprising at the end of the video on what we need to generate enough power, but to ensure that there would be enough power throughout day and night, I opted to build some wind turbines. These don't rely on the sun being out, so can work day and night, and they don't need gas like a gas-powered generator, so they'll never run out. Yes, there would be some less windy days than others, but with enough of them and enough battery storage, this felt like the best option. I could of course do a hybrid and have wind turbines with gas generators, or wind turbines with solar panels, or even a combination of all three, but for simplicity here, I've opted to go for one. And the reason why this makes so much more sense at the moment will be revealed at the end. So we've established that we can wire building fuse boxes to one another. We can't, however, wire batteries to one another to make a working circuit. We've established our method of power generation in wind, and now it's about getting this thing done and seeing if you can, in fact, power an entire town in Vane. To kick things off, I started off with my power generators. Now, I knew I'd need to be able to wire things over some distance, so whilst I accept for aesthetics, perhaps having a solar or wind farm out of sight would have been preferable, I opted to try and reduce the amount of back and forth needed by putting it centrally. Full disclosure, whilst I'm trying to be resource mindful in this video, I am utilising God mode. This video isn't about gathering resources, that'd be dull. This is about testing to see if we can make a scalable power system for an entire town. The central-ish location I plumbed for was the fire department. It wasn't perfectly central, but there was ample space around it to be able to set up shop. Location secured, the first thing I did was set up some wind generators and supplied them a battery to each generator. Then I wired all of the turbines into their own batteries, and then the batteries into a single extension port, and then I was able to connect my first building to the beginnings of our grid. The fire department was online, building 1 out of the 40 plus I planned to get connected. Then I got my digital pencil out to plan how each house was going to be connected. In essence, working out from the electricity generation point, where I'd also housed my batteries, planned how the electricity would go from one house or building to the next. I tried to keep it so that a house would not have more than one further connection in the chain, but this wasn't always possible, so some houses did have more than one additional fuse box connected to them. This principle was tested further when it dawned on me that some of the garages in Redford have a completely separate fuse box of their own. I extended my max wire distance to the maximum permissible 10,000. I could have used extension ports, yes, but again, we're testing the idea, not focusing on the resources. Connecting all 40 plus buildings in practice took a long time, as in literally overnight in-game. The satisfying thing about doing this was seeing the buildings light up as I went. In every building where the internal doors weren't locked, I'd flick on all the lights in that building to ensure I'd get the maximum effect. But this also provided a really handy way of ensuring I'd connected the building's fuse box. It's a little bit backwards thinking here too. You don't go from the power source to the thing you want to power, you go from the thing that needs power, in this case a building's unpowered fuse box, to the power source, in this case being the neighbouring house's powered fuse box. This chain continued throughout all of Redford until I'd done it. The whole of Redford was powered. I took a quick drive around the town, at night of course, and basked in the glory. You absolutely can power a whole town in Vane. You'll need a hell of a lot of patience, a lot of resources, and a decent chunk of your time, but it is rewarding to see it done. And, practically, for you and your multiplayer servers, this means you can have a group of generators and then share the power with your friend. There is two things to be aware of though. Currently, power usage isn't being accurately measured, so at the moment, this grid could actually probably work on half, if not less than half, of the wind turbines I've got. And secondly, Vane is early access. Whilst this is possible at the time of recording, there's nothing to say the daisy chaining of the fuse boxes or anything in this video won't get patched or hotfixed out. There was one thing I missed whilst driving around though. Streetlights. I think I found my next project. Thanks for watching. Please do like the video, subscribe, and let me know your power plans or how you may use electricity in Vane going forwards. I'll catch you on Monday for my Let's Play and on Wednesday for another apocalyptic video. Catch you later.